Hey everyone, I hope you guys had a great weekend. Just starting off, I wanted to make sure that you guys did all of last week's assignments that had to do with factoring and using the distributive property. You're going to be using those greatest common factor skills in this week's lessons. There's 3 main lessons and activities that I'm doing with you guys, and you have all week to complete them. So this next unit is pretty much over fractions. By the end of this unit, you will know how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions. Before we get into the different fraction operations, I want to make sure that you understand some of the smaller steps that you need before you can get to those larger operation steps. We'll be talking about simplifying and changing mixed numbers to improper fractions to mixed numbers. So starting off at the basics, this is our first lesson video. This is over identifying fractions. Just figuring out what a fraction is, what a fraction looks like, what the different parts of a fraction are, just how to identify what those parts are. So our learning targets is over adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing fractions. Again, it's going to be a while before we start that. We're just starting off with the basics. So where do we see fractions in the real world? Fractions are really similar to decimals, where we use it all the time in the real world. We use it with money. This picture is measuring cups. We use it to cook, to bake. We use it to cut things up into equal pieces to share with people. This is a measuring tape. We use it to measure things. Maybe if you want to be a construction worker one day or an engineer, you have to understand how to read a tape measure, and those come in fraction units. Mechanics, they use fractions all the time. This is a picture of time. We use fractions with time, and there are so many other things that you use fractions with. These are just a few examples of why it's important, why you need to understand fractions, why you need to understand decimals for the real world and your future. Okay, this next slide is just over important vocabulary for you to know. The first one is fractions. They represent equal parts of a whole or a collection. And we'll see more examples of that as we continue the video. It's important to know that many fractions represent a part of something instead of one whole something. Where a fraction can be one whole, usually it's just part of something. Maybe you have part of a pizza that you have left over. Maybe you have a certain amount of money that you have to pay back. There's many different parts to fractions. While we're talking about parts, there's also parts of a fraction. You're probably used to seeing one number on top, one number on the bottom. Those numbers are called the numerator and the denominator. The numerator is the number that's on top. You need to know that. That shows how many parts we have in the fraction. The denominator is the bottom number in the fraction. You need to know that. And that shows the number of equal parts an item is divided into. So how many total pieces make up one whole. Okay. This is a slide that you guys will fill in, but I'm going to go over some of these examples. So just by watching these videos, you're getting some answers into your slides. So what fraction represents the pieces of pie left in this pan? Okay, so here's the model, a pie pan. To find the numerator, we need to identify how many pieces of pie we have left over. Well, think about how many pieces of pie you see in that pan. I see 1, 2. So 2 is going to be our numerator. That's how many pieces of pie we have. The denominator is going to be how many pieces we need. To find the denominator, we need to identify how many pieces of pie make up one whole pie. So if this is one whole piece, if this is one piece, this is a second piece, that would have been 1/3 piece. So there would have been 3 total pieces of pie if this was a complete pie. So the total number of pieces, of equal pieces, that made up one whole pie would have been 3. Okay, so this fraction model represents 2/3. Okay, this is going to be a practice problem for you. You need to identify the numerator and the denominator of the blueberry pie in this pan. Think about how many pieces we have, how many pieces make up the whole. You have to know which one goes on top, which one goes on the bottom. Same thing with this one. And then the rest of this activity is actually a riddle that you need to solve. You're going to have 2 days to do this activity. So you could do one day with just the lesson part. You can do one day with this fraction riddle. I do have some examples in here that I'm going to talk to you about. So this riddle is, what did the egg do when it heard a joke? You have to answer the questions below, match each answer to the letter in the key, then write the letter in the space above its problem number to find the answer to the riddle. I'm going to show you an example of that. Okay, this is what the practice problems look like. I did number 1 for you. So number 1 asks, what fraction of the shapes are circles? So I'm going to look at these 2 shapes. I know that there are 2 total shapes. That's how many total pieces there are. That's going to be in my denominator. That's the number that goes on the bottom. The number on top is, well, how many are circles? I can look at this and I can see there's only one circle. So there's only one circle out of 2 total shapes. So my fraction would be 1/2. Okay, you're going to have to do the same thinking for questions 2 through 8. Read the questions carefully and find the fraction, the numerator and the denominator that fit that puzzle. Your key is over here on the right. I can see that 1/2 is down here. The letter that goes with 1/2 is D. The puzzle is on the next page. That's not going to be a requirement, but if you do the puzzle, I will give you an extra point on your assignment, which might help. So on this next page, this is the riddle. We just did question 1. So I'm going to find the 1. And my answer for number 1 was 1/2. The letter that went with 1/2 was D. So I'm going to put D for number 1. Whatever your answer is for number 2, you're going to find the letter that goes with your answer. That letter is going to go in number 2. If you guys have any questions about solving any of these riddles, finding the answers, if you're having a hard time understanding it, I can give you extra help, extra resources. I can give you some games that you could do to practice. But tomorrow we're moving on to simplifying fractions. So make sure you understand factoring from last week. Make sure you understand identifying fractions before you move on to the next lesson. Hope you guys have a good time with this. Again, let me know if you have any questions.